They descended on the school gates, demanding to see the head teacher.
Bring him out! Bring the head teacher out!
Dozens of protesters, some of them parents, others not, angry that children in a religious studies class were shown cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, first featured in the French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo.
We know what these images have caused in France. We know what the outrage has caused. We know from that how insulting these images can be to a Muslim.
Or if you criticize Islam or you draw a cartoon, as Charlie Hebdo did, you know, here's the cover of after the attack on Charlie Hebdo, which is actually a statement on fanaticism, not on Muhammad, Islam's prophet. You know, so when you see something like that, it's not automatic that every Muslim is offended by Charlie Hebdo. There are, for example, journalists in Turkey who printed the Charlie Hebdo cartoon. There was a press, Iranian state-owned press, that printed the Charlie Hebdo cartoons and was shut down as a result. There were lawyers and journalists who tried to rally in defense of Charlie Hebdo in Iran and were stopped and beaten back by security agents. You know, so, and there were cartoonists from across the Arab world who showed their solidarity with Charlie, and they were able to say, "Je suis Charlie." You know, that doesn't mean that they're siding with every reactionary head of state that silences free speech, that censors free speech by pretending to side with Charlie, the Saudi government coming and siding with Charlie when it's murdering its free thinkers there.
A student who had complained against school teacher Samuel Paty has admitted that she was lying and spreading falsehoods. The girl had claimed that Samuel Paty had asked Muslim students to leave the class when he showed the cartoons of Prophet Muhammad. The girl's father later lodged a complaint. He also amplified the allegations online. What seemed to be a harmless lie told by a schoolgirl spiraled into one of the worst terror attacks that France has witnessed.
This is where I live, this is my community. Don't come here and shout at me in the street. The Muslim community of Batley and Spen deserve better than this. They deserve better than this.
We're the community.
I'm asking you, are you going to support Muslim parents?
Do not walk away.
You don't want their children to learn about LGBT indoctrination. Are you supporting us? Kim, on here, answer the question. Why are you running?
Now, that was a really, really horrible video on every account. You've got to remember, Kim Leadbeater, her sister 5 years ago, was killed in the constituency by a far-right activist. So to have a group of men aggressively haranguing her in the street is really, really horrible to watch. At the same time, some important background there is that Kim Leadbeater is gay. And so you've got these people shouting at her, "Are you going to be backing LGBT education in schools?" Really, really, well, I mean, obviously it's outrightly homophobic, but also she's clearly being targeted because of her own sexuality. So absolutely appalling, disgusting. It's also important to note that the man harassing Kim Leadbeater isn't in any way representative of the Muslim community in Batley. In fact, he's not even from Batley. So he's called Shakil Afzar, and he was one of the leaders of the anti-LGBT protests in Birmingham in 2019. So having been there only a week ago, Aaron, what's your reaction to the video we just showed of Kim Leadbeater getting harassed essentially by an activist who wasn't from the constituency, but, you know, is trying to tap into something, I suppose?
Abu Layth, who disrespect our brothers and sisters of Palestine. Yeah.
This is Mufti Abu Layth's house, and they're throwing rocks through the windows, calling him out, cursing him.
Come on, mother. Come on, mother.
They get in the house. You can imagine what would be going through the minds of Mufti Abu Layth's wife and his young daughter. They're going up the stairs. They have no fear. They have no shame. They have no respect by the Islamic standards as well. The respect of and the sanctity of the house, and barging in someone's house where there could be women and children there. Now, this is atrocious. This is condemnable in the highest of the degree. Whether you agree with Mufti Abu Layth or you don't agree with him, this is something that just cannot be tolerated.
Now things are changing. Now we have popular Muslim apologists openly declaring that ex-Muslims will be executed if Islam wins. Here's Ali Dawah telling the apostate prophet that in a state governed by Islamic law, the apostate prophet and others like him will be executed.
This is a part of our religion. There's a reason to it.
Yeah, there's a reason why there's a capital punishment, because people like you, little weaklings who leave their religion and cause corruption in the land by spreading it, the capital punishment in Islamic law would be applied to you. We have no doubt, and we're proud of that. Yeah, capital punishment will be applied in an Islamic state. Yeah, not individuals going and doing it themselves like idiots. Yeah, no, under an emir, it is done. Yes, and we, you know what, we'll be watching.
History. You might expect Adam Saleh, a Muslim YouTuber with nearly 5 million subscribers, to reply in the comments, "No, we don't want to execute apostates. Islam is a religion of peace and tolerance." Instead, after watching Ali Dawah publicly proclaim that the goal they're striving towards includes executing apostates, Adam Saleh replied, "Allahu Akbar." Muhammad Hijab agreed, declaring, "This apis apostate makes me sick. Great to see the team humiliate this creature." Notice, if you're an apostate, it's in your best interest to oppose the spread of Islam. But as soon as you oppose the spread of Islam, millions of Westerners are ready to tell you that you're a racist and a bigot and an Islamophobe, as if it's racist and bigoted and Islamophobic to not want to be executed.
And so, the reality of the matter is that this conflation between Islam as an idea that can be criticized, Islamism as a far-right political movement, which is the fascism of our era, in my opinion. It represents, whether it's the Muslim Brotherhood, whether it's the Iranian regime, whether it's ISIS, whether it's the Saudi regime. It's a far-right political movement that uses lovely, flowery words, often doublespeak, to defend the rights of the Islamists by pretending that they are defending the rights of all Muslims. There is no ROE. There is no ROE. There are many, many Muslims who are languishing in prisons and facing the death penalty for criticizing Islam, not even criticizing Islam. You have 27 Qurani Muslims in the Sudan. They believe that the Quran is holy. They question the Hadith.
Whether you are a Muslim or an ex-Muslim, you're an atheist or a theist from any other denomination, if you don't agree with their worldview, with the worldview of the extremist or fundamentalist, even you can be a target of their violence.
Successive British governments, including the Tories, who they criticized Labour for it, that if you examine them in detail, what they did was they told the police you mustn't talk to the East London Mosque or some of these other groups. The police went on talking to them or got very angry if they weren't allowed to talk to them. But the police handed the Finsbury Park Mosque to Muslim Brotherhood groups to run after they got rid of jihadis who were in the mosque. And I don't know if you remember the campaign on the Sharia laws, the One Law for All campaign, which I was involved with, and Southall Black Sisters and ICRO, the Iranian Kurdish women's rights organization. So we were campaigning against the parallel legal systems and the so-called Sharia courts, in this country. And we longed for an inquiry, but when the government set it up, and this is Theresa May's government, they set it up as a theological inquiry with a theologian in charge, with imams as advisors. And we ended up the group that wanted it, the coalition of women's groups that said, we want this inquiry, we want them investigated. And in the end, we had to boycott the inquiry because it was set up on a theological basis. It borrowed the words of a commission called the Wolf Commission, which was about including more faith groups in the public square. And that was an independent commission, but the government took the language and the recommendations from that and didn't even, the inquiry was tasked to find good practice in Sharia, not to see if they're violating human rights.
They're trying to justify somehow.
It was mad. So we actually did much more research than the inquiry did. We had 30 or 40, through the coalition of women's groups, we did all the research into what women faced under these Sharia courts. But, one of the things we found was that all the time there's state failure as well. They couldn't exist. They couldn't go on existing. They are charities. They're not secret organizations. Some of them have charitable numbers. Some of them are in mosques, which are charities. So therefore they run under the umbrella of the mosque. Yeah. There may be ones, the ones who are arguing pro-Sharia arguments were saying, oh, these are the good ones. The other ones might be worse. They're in somebody's living room. Maybe they're worse. But the ones we analyzed, we showed that they have links with extreme religious fundamentalists. We showed, how they oppress women. And yet, the message of One Law for All is not, the Tories will use that language and they'll use anti-Muslim bigotry. And so some people will think, oh, they're going to be tough on Sharia. But the evidence that we have is that they're not.
They're not.
They're really not. And for me, this is part of that multicultural politics, you know, that allows them to want to keep this place of religion in public life. Now, why do they do that? One of the reasons they do that is because the church and religion has always been used to justify inherent and birth privileges, right? We know that from the stuff we know, the work we do on religion and the way in which people are, you know, invited to join a religion, but then they can't leave. It's a one-way system, or if they're born into it, you know, they may be killed for trying to leave it, and so on. So we know that there are these barriers with religion. In England, in society, there aren't these barriers, but the church still has an established position, right? And the government has been promoting religious schools. So even Michael Gove, who is responsible for some of the worst history education, so he rolled back more progressive history teaching to produce a kind of storybook version of the empire, which has been condemned by teachers unions, by, you know, professors at Oxford and Cambridge, saying this is a, you know, this is like a child's version of history. It's not what modern history teaching is about. It's a lie, basically. So he's doing that on the one hand. He's very anti-jihadi and all the rest of it, you know. He's a neocon, he's sort of supposedly anti-jihadi, but on the other hand, he's giving more space to religious schools because he wants to destroy state education. So he's undermining the universal basis on which we can fight that kind of religious privilege. Meanwhile, nobody's attending church. So the only way that the Church of England keeps its privileges is to hang on to its schooling system, and it stays within the system. And when they had the Sharia inquiry, the judge who was on the inquiry, there was a judge on the inquiry, it wasn't judge-led, but the judge on the inquiry, when I investigated him, I said he's the nearest thing to a Sharia judge because he sits on a Christian ecclesiastical court,
Right.
and he belongs to a Christian legal group that is mounting all kinds of challenges on, you know, anti-homophobic laws and so on. In fact, probably promoting homophobia in Africa and other places. So a very right-wing Christian group is what they put as the judge on the Sharia inquiry. And he has no interest in abolishing the Sharia courts. He just wants to make a few little, you know, twiddles here and there and, you know, make sure they carry on functioning, because that's the way they keep justifying their own continued existence.
Complete.
But what I'm saying is that there is no us and we. There are many Muslims who defend Charlie because in defending Charlie, they see that they are defending themselves. Because if Charlie cannot criticize Islam in the secular West, what chance do people have who are defending the right to speak in countries under Sharia law, in countries under blasphemy laws, in countries under apostasy laws? 14 countries punish apostates to death, 20 punish blasphemers to death. To say that this is, you know, I'm bringing in the Muslim majority countries and we're talking about Europe, look, you know very well the Muslim Brotherhood travels all over the world because it sees Islamism is a global movement. The violence is global. It affects people in Nigeria, in Mali, in Cameroon, in Iran, in Saudi Arabia. Mosques are blown up by the jihadis. Schools are blown up by the jihadis. And not only just the jihadis, Sharia law discriminates against women. There are many women, Muslim women, fighting against discriminatory family laws, against gender segregation, against compulsory veiling. You know that. That is the reality for many people. So to say that we can't bring these two together, or that saying that is emotional, I think misses the point. I think there are many in this country that benefit from pretending that Muslim equals Islamist. They don't.